Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be reviewing the Rikon 10-326 14-inch bandsaw. Well, it's been some time since I purchased this saw, and I've had the opportunity to put it through some paces, whether it be bandsaw boxes, resaw, making circle jigs for it. So I thought that today I would give you my honest opinions as to what I think about the saw so far with the things that I've put it through. Well, everybody seems to be very interested in fit and finish, and why not? I mean, we pay a lot of money for these tools, so the finish on the tabletops and the tool itself should be A1 for the money that we pay. As far as the tool goes and the abuse that I've put it through, the finish on everything has stood up half decently. I don't have nicks, I don't have paint coming off or chipping off from me hitting it with wood. I don't have gouges in the cast iron. But as far as the tabletop and its flatness and how it has worked out for me from day one, I've had absolutely zero complaints about it. Now that brings me to my next point, and that would be the blade size here. With the Rikon, the blade size being 111 inches, that's a pretty common size of bandsaw blade. Therefore, you have the option that you can purchase it from whoever the heck you want. If you have a certain manufacturer of blade that you enjoy or that you like, you can stick with them because chances are they carry that size blade. Well, while we're in this upper cabinet, I want to talk about the wheels on this particular saw. I love the fact that this has cast iron wheels. What I also like, these ones here, right out of the box, right from the manufacturer, will very well balance with next to no vibration whatsoever. Of course, every tool gets vibration, but when you have an out of balance wheel that is running in a saw at the RPM that these run, that vibration is just increased to no end. Not a problem here with the balance of the wheels. They absolutely function perfectly. Well, the next thing that I want to talk about would be this. And what this is this is a tension guide that is located in the upper cabinet. And honestly, I've never been a fan of these. I've never really trusted them. And I was hoping that the Rikons would be a little better, but unfortunately, on the negative side of this review, it's the same as every other manufacturer in that right now you can see that I'm just above, or I guess it's below if you follow the scale here, but just below the tension for a 5/8 band. Well, I have a 1/4 inch band or a 1/4 inch bandsaw blade in there, and it's tensioned at 5/8. So what I would like to do is I'm going to release that tension. I'm going to put it down so that it's at the 1/4 inch mark. And there we are. We are at 1/4 inch. And let's just pan over and have a look at the blade. What? All right. So you can see my issue here. Guys, when it comes to tensioning a bandsaw blade, I have never seen a saw manufacturer that ever got these blade tensioning gauges right. Sorry, Rikon, it's useless. Well, here we are at the back of the saw, and I want to talk about the blade guard raising here. What do I think of it? It's a rack and pinion system, and it is smooth as glass, boys. It locks down rock solid with no problems, and it's very sturdy. I don't really have any complaints about the function of the blade guard. Rikon has put some thought into where to keep the adjustment Allen keys on this saw, and they have provided a little unit here that holds all the adjustment Allen keys. I think this is a great addition to the saw, and this is, I think that even though it's something small, it's a nice touch, and I like the fact that they've added it. I also really like the fact of the quick tensioning, and it is extremely quick and extremely fast to tension your blade. Seems to be at a good height. It functions well. It's solid. It doesn't feel like you're gonna snap or break anything as you're putting it into place. It is a good, solid tensioning arm, and I think they've done a great job with that. The next thing I'd like to touch on is the tracking of a blade. For starters, I'd just like to say, don't track the lower wheel. Okay, that's a whole new ball game. Your tracking of your new blade when you install from, say, I don't know, a 1/4 inch to a 5/8, let's just say, all your tracking should be done here at the upper controls. And how does the Rikon fare when it comes to tracking a blade? The adjustments are extremely easy and they're quite responsive, where you just take off the tension right here with this knob on your tracking knob, and you can turn it clockwise or counterclockwise depending on which way you need to track your blade. And then when you get it set, tighten it down with that little set knob again, and you are done. Well, it's a minor thing, but to me it's some good thought, where they've provided on the back of the upper column a 120 volt receptacle. This is a great addition to the tool in order to plug in a work light. I would have liked to see Rikon actually incorporate a work light into this, and it would have been nice to have an LED work light on the column here or up underneath the upper casing to light up the table and illuminate your work. Unfortunately, that never came into play, and that also would have added extra cost, but they did provide this outlet, and it's a fantastic addition to the saw in order to provide your own work light. Well, that brings us down to the motor. And the motor here is a 1 3/4 horsepower, and it comes wired at 120 volts. Now, so far so good. I have no complaints with the size of this motor. It seems adequate for everything I've needed it for. If you want to put it at 240 volts, it can be rewired. That is not a problem. But I will point out to you that if you rewire this motor to suit a 240 volt application in order to drop your amperage in half, what you will lose is that receptacle up top that I just spoke about, because with the 240 volt configuration, that receptacle ends up being disconnected because it will no longer work correctly. And that would bring us just to the left of our motor to look at our 4-inch dust port. It actually does quite well. There's still some gathering of dust in the corners of the machine. Is it efficient or is it adequate? I think it is. I think it does a great job of working to keep the dust out of the air. Well, the next thing that I'd like to touch on here in the review is the locking arm for your table tilt and the rack and pinion controls in order to tilt your table. Let's start with the locking arm. What do I think of this locking arm? You know what? Honestly, I love it. I think it is fantastic. This is a great little system that locks the table in rock solid, and with one quick motion. You don't have to mess around cranking on stuff and that sort of thing. It does a really nice job. I think this is great. What do I think about the rack and pinion? Well, in theory, it's great. In practice, I have one word for you: awkward. The weight of the table will not allow you to crank this thing. I've got it loosened and I can't crank it because of the weight of the table. So you have to help it or turn the actual knob like this. Going down isn't so bad because now the weight is going with you. So then you can use the crank. But going the opposite way is, honestly, that is, well, there's lots of things that are good in theory, but they don't work as you thought they would. And I'm a little disappointed with it, but going down is great. Well, my next thing I'd like to point out is this. It's actually right on the money. There is no issues here with how accurate the scale is on the fence. What my issue here is, if you adjust your fence, and let's just say that we're going to put our fence at the 2-inch mark. Well, let's have a look up at the blade. I have a 2-inch setup block here. We'll place it against the fence. And what is the deal with that? We got ourselves about a 3/16 to a 1/4 of an inch difference between the fence markings on the rail and what it really is. And I can tell you, I have adjusted every way to Sunday and I cannot get it so that the 0 markings on the fence line up with the center cut of the blade. Well, the Rikon saw comes with the lower cabinet for storage. It is made of high quality thick steel and it really, you know, I absolutely love it. I think it does a fantastic job all around of being able to store all of my accessories for it, and I really like the way that it works. Now, that of course will bring us to our mobile stand, which of course is not included with it. You have to buy that as an external accessory. Personally, I like it. I like the 2-wheel dolly type where it comes with a handle where you can just sort of pop it back and wheel it where you want it to go. Well, now that I've opened the cabinet and talked about the space and talked about the stand, and I've also pulled this out, and this would be the resaw bar or guide. And why don't we take it up top and I'll put it on the fence and I'll talk about that for a minute. Well, while it's not in the right position here, I've just got it placed to show you how it mounts. And it has quick adjustments at the back for you to slide it however you wish along the slots that are provided in the fence. It works very well. It helps you to guide the wood and you can rock it back and forth to adjust your cuts as you go along. It is solid steel. There is no issues. The finish is great. I've never had a problem with it. And the adjustments on it are quick, easy, and secure. Once you lock this in, you're locked in. That's all there is to it. Now, what about our fence? Rikon has done a great job here on this fence that they've provided. I like the fact that it is nice and tall, nice and straight. What if you don't want a fence that's that tall? Well, you just have to loosen one knob on the side, and once you get that loosened, of course, the fence slides out. And you can change its configuration to a much lower profile. Now, how easy is it to actually change it? I find that it can be a little cumbersome and sometimes it hooks on this tab here at this one end. But you know what, that's a minor issue. It doesn't affect the use of the fence. They've also provided with the fence a means to adjust for blade drift. And if your blade is drifting, you can rotate this knob, and I'm not sure if it'll show it here. You kind of have to have it, there you go. Can you see that? It will pivot that fence in or out depending on what you require to adjust for your blade drift. Now that I've just down there is super dramatic, but you can see where you can adjust that back and forth. Honestly, I've never had to use it because I haven't noticed much blade drift on this saw at all. So does that function work? Is it useful? I honestly don't know because I've never had to use it. Well, just a quick note on the on-off switch. It's a very solid switch. It works very well. I like that they have provided this quick off kind of panic button there. However, I don't like its positioning. It is way too low and way too awkward. And if I was cutting something with this fence, say about here, and I'm working right here at the fence, you can see where if I had a panic situation where I needed to get to that switch, now I'm either gouging myself on the sharp corners of this fence or I'm awkwardly reaching around trying to smack that thing. I think that this switch would have been much better if it was higher up on the column, way more accessible than what it is. Function, it works great. It's a solid unit, but positioning, I think they could have done better. I couldn't do this review without mentioning one of my favorite things about this saw, which is the guide bearings and the thrust bearing and the fact that they are spring loaded. The setup on this saw for these bearings is so fast and so easy, and it is one of my favorite things about the saw. It's one of the things that makes blade changes almost enjoyable, and it's just a matter of putting your bearings to the saw, or to the blade rather, and giving them a little tighten. And there they are. They're in place. Thrust bearings, same thing. All you need to do is push it in place to where you want it. And once you get it in your position, you just give it that little twist and it stays in place. Really, think about this now. Closed, done, and done. Finished. And it's just as easy to release them. All right, so we've talked about the blade tensioning, we've talked about the motor, the switch, the fence, the rail. We've talked about the blade guard, we've talked about the guide, the onboard storage, the accessories. We've talked about all this stuff, but what we haven't talked about or touched on is how the saw performs. Guys, I absolutely love the way it performs. It is quiet, it runs well, it's smooth, and I've only resawn up to about 9.5 inches thick at this point, and that's maple, oak, walnut, your usual suspects. And honestly, the 1 3/4 horsepower motor at 120 volts, I've never had it stall, I've never had it bind, I've never had it have a problem and say, I don't want to cut this. It has been absolutely fantastic on everything that I've put it through right from day one. So, although I may have a couple minor issues with a few things, honestly, when it comes to how it performs in my shop, it makes my older one look like a toy, which is sad because I really liked that older one. But I love this one way more. So performance, you won't have a problem. And there you have it. The Rikon 10-326 14-inch bandsaw. Guys, let's sum it all up. Out of 10, what would I give the Rikon saw? You know what? I'm going to give it a 7. 7 out of 10. Why did it lose 3 points on the review? The scale on the rail, on the fence rail, that knocks some points off there. The blade tension, of course, that took it away. The positioning of the on-off switch. One of the things that also kind of disappointed me, as an electrician, I would have loved to bump this to 240 in order to reduce the amperage. I left it at 120 because of the fact that I was going to lose the receptacle. Now, I could have wired the receptacle, being skilled in the electrical trade, but I felt I shouldn't have to. So I tried it at the 120 volts and it was just fine. But that was one disappointing thing, was that in order to convert it to a 240 volt machine, which the motor is capable of, you lose another function of the saw that you paid for. That's my problem right there. You paid for that receptacle and now you bump it up to 240, which is an option that they give you, and you lose something you paid for. That doesn't make any sense to me. In fact, it's wrong. But other than that, I love the saw. I honestly do. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would. Would I purchase it again, knowing now what I know? If I knew it then, yeah, I'd purchase it again because it has not let me down. The minor little things that dropped 3 points off the review were not enough for me to say this saw wasn't worth the money. I still love the saw. It still does great in my shop, and I would still recommend it to those who are looking for a new saw for their home shop. Anyway, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the review. I hope I've answered all your questions about the saw. If you're new to the program, please like and subscribe and click the bell for your notifications so you don't miss any episodes of the show. Not every episode is a winner. Not every episode is for everybody, but I hope today's episode was for you. Guys, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesdays.